Bible club, it's Bible club, it's Bible club in our town. There's singing, there's laughing, let's get the word on the ground. We're all excited, and we are all delighted. It's Bible club, Bible club, Bible club, Bible club, Bible club in our town.
So our verse says that he is before all things. Okay? He is before all things. So, listen in here. I know we're looking up for the Bible, but I haven't even told you what verse to look at yet. Well, that's right. We know that verse. We all just said it. What we want is verse 3:20. Chapter 3:20. Colossians 3:20. So, Colossians 3:20. But our verse here that we all know says he is before all things. So what place is he in? So if he is before all things, what place is he in? Let's see here. We have 3 people with their hands up. Go ahead, 4 people. Everybody with your hands up on 3. Tell me what you're thinking. 1, 2, 3. Heaven. He is in heaven. What did you say? First place. Yes, right. He is in heaven. But I was thinking of like first, second, third, fourth type place. That kind of place. So if you knew that, what place? If he is before all things, what place does he have? Has he got 6th place? No, because if he's in 6th place, there's 5 things in front of him, right? Right? But he is before everything. What place is he in? First place. Now, who is he? Who is he? He is God, but what's his name? We're talking particularly about those with your hands. Say it. 1, 2, 3. Jesus. Jesus Christ. That's right. So, and our lesson today, listen in here, our lesson today is going to be about Jesus first, or about Christ first. In our story, let's see here. How should we say this? Have you ever tried to figure out what it would be like, or what it was like hundreds and hundreds of years ago? Have you ever tried to figure that out? Maybe you've seen a movie and they were trying to show you what it was like 500 years ago, and it was not cars or anything like that, right? And the clothes they wore was different, right? Things were different. You think things were different for the people who lived in the Bible than it is for us now? It was. It was very, very different. But I want to tell you that even while it was very, very different, some things were the same. Some things were the same. Listen here. So, there was men in the Bible. And almost all of those men had husbands. No, they didn't. No, none of them had husbands. They were husbands. That means they had a wife, right? And they were fathers. That means they had children. Okay? So men have wives and they have children. Do men have wives and children today? Yes. Lots of men have wives. And there was lots of ladies. And the ladies, they had husbands, right? And they had children. And do ladies today, they have husbands and they have children. So that's the same as back in the Bible. And there was children. And children had parents, didn't they? Do children have parents today? Yeah. So, even though they dress different, that's the same as today. And there are workers. Okay? Like when I go to work, when I go to my job, I work. I'm working for somebody, aren't I? Okay? And back then, there was people who worked for other people. And there were people there's bosses, right? Does your mom or your dad have a boss at work? Yeah. And there was bosses back in the Bible. So in the Bible, even though they wore different kinds of clothes, they might have eaten a little bit of different kind of food, but not much different kind of food. Men still were fathers and husbands. Ladies were mothers and wives. Children parents, and people worked for other people, and some people had people that worked for them. So it wasn't much different. And so today, I'm going to try. Now, I don't know if I've ever done this. I don't remember if I did this the last time. But I'm going to need you to help me. Okay? I'm going to need you to help me. Because I'm going to try to act like I'm Philemon. Well, Philemon was a man. Remember in our verse, in our list of the books of the Bible? Actually, we're over here, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon. Philemon was a man. And Philemon lived in the town of Colossae. He lived in the town of Colossae. You remember on our very first lesson we talked about how Colossae was here, and some of the men from this town went to Ephesus and heard Paul preach, and they went back to Colossae, and those that believed would gather every week at Philemon's house. And there were some other people that, so everybody who was a believer would get together. What day of the week do you think they all got together and met together at Philemon's house? What day do you think, Victoria? Saturday? No, it wasn't Saturday, actually. Ian, what day do you think? It was Sunday. Sunday is the first day of the week. And the Bible teaches us that those people who had turned from their idols and believed on Jesus, they would get together on the first day of the week to study and learn the Bible some more and figure out and be told how they could become better Christians. And Philemon had a big house. He must have had a big house because the church, it seems like, the church in Colossae met at his house. So, I don't know if I can do this. I don't think I'm up to it. I don't think I can do this. So Philemon, I've been thinking about this all week long, and I don't know if I can do it. I'm just going to tell you, I think. Think so? I can do it? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm Philemon. Do I look like Philemon now? Okay, now I'm Philemon. Okay? And in my house, everybody would come to my house every Sunday after me and Epaphras and Aristarchus. We went to Ephesus and we had heard Paul preach. And when we came back, we told all our friends about Jesus. And more people would come to my house, and we would learn more about what the Bible said about how we should live for Jesus since we believed on it. Sometimes prophets would come, and they would preach to us. And then some really, really, really smart men came, and they were philosophers. And when they came to my house and talked to all of us in our church, they told us that God was so holy that we couldn't get to God. We know God is holy. And they told us that people were wicked and evil and sinful. And we knew that was true. And so then they told us that we would have to maybe pray to angels and obey Jewish rules in order to get to God. And that just didn't sound right. So we sent Epaphras, our friend, we sent him to go to Rome and tell Paul what these people have been saying. And it was such an exciting day when we saw Epaphras, and he had a letter from Paul. And he came to my house, and all the other Christians in our town came to my house, and we all sat there and we listened as Epaphras read the letter that Paul had for us. And in his letter, Paul reminded us, that Jesus Christ is the highest over all. He is the head of the whole world because he created the world. And Paul reminded us in his letter that Jesus Christ is the head over the church. And Paul reminded us that because we have believed on Jesus, Jesus lives inside us. And so we don't have to pray to angels. We don't have to pray to saints. We don't have to pray to Mary. We can pray to Jesus, who is God himself. There's nothing between us and God because we know Jesus. And then, so we realize that Jesus Christ was the greatest, was the highest, and that we decided that we were going to put him first. We weren't going to worry about anything else, right? Because he is before all things. Now, at this point, Mrs. Philemon, she's right there. Mrs. Philemon says, yeah, but tell them how we put Christ first. How, kids, do you want to know how to make Christ first in your life? You should, right? We should all want to make Christ first in our life. Because, why? Why should we want to make Christ first? Because he is. He is before all things, and by him all things consist. And you believed on Jesus, he is first. But sometimes we do things that doesn't make it look like he's first. So, well, even people in our church, I'm Philemon again. People in our church that met with us, we started listening to one part of Paul's letter, and it was kind of embarrassing. He said, you guys need to put away and stop doing those things that your flesh likes. Sexual sins, and dirty thinking, and filthy mouth, filthy language. And we were like, there's people in our church that are still doing that? That's bad. All those things are selfish things. People that think that way, people that do that thing, are they putting Christ first? No. Who are they putting first? Boys? Boys, who are they putting first? Themselves. That's right. And Paul told us, he says, you need to kill those things. You need to put away those evil things and kill the desire to do those things. He doesn't say to kill ourselves, but kill the desire to do those things. Like we have to take this little sign that says, me first, and bury it. Bury it in the ground. And every time we want to do something, we think, is this for me first or for others first? Because if it's for me first, then Christ is not being first. He even said, Paul told us that we shouldn't be angry and be fighting with one another. And I said, there were times when I got upset at the children because they were yelling and screaming, and I was like, I went in there and was yelling and screaming at them, and I lost my temper, and I realized that I was making even more noise than them, and I was putting myself first. Then, Paul told us in his letter some other things that we can do. Things to remember when we're with other people, like being kind to one another and caring about one another. And even he said we should sing songs that God likes. We should sing songs that put Christ first. Have you guys ever heard songs that don't put Christ first? Oh yeah, there's lots of songs around our world today. They talk about money, they talk about women, they talk about evil, wicked things. Do those songs put Christ first? No. Paul was saying, you shouldn't listen to those kind of songs. If you're listening to those kind of songs, you're not putting Christ first. And we thought, that's right. We need to make sure we sing songs that put Christ first. And then he started telling us about in our home how things ought to be. Now, it's different these days, but when I was alive, me, Mr. Philemon, nobody in the world cared about women. And nobody cared about their own children. They just looked at women and children as another slave to serve them. And what do you think children thought and women thought? They didn't respect men. Nobody was happy. Everybody was miserable. We know about, now I'm not Mr. Philemon, we know about how people ought to be treated because the Bible tells us. But back then, they didn't care about that thing, anything like that. But Paul in told us what we should do even in our home. He told Mrs. Philemon that she ought to respect me. And I like that. I like it when my wife respects me. That's a good thing. I don't like it when she just snivels around and does whatever she wants and doesn't do anything I ask her to do. Well, the Bible, Paul in his letter told us that the wives should obey their husbands and respect them. Mrs. Philemon, she says, I used to not really like being in our home, but when I started doing what God said, when I put Christ first and respected Mr. Philemon and obeyed him, I began to have a happy life. You think that's possible? To do what somebody else says and be happy? It is possible because it's God's instruction. Mr. Philemon says yes, and I really didn't deserve all that. But Paul told us in his letter that I was supposed to love my wife like Jesus loves me. Most of the time I just love myself. If I'm out at the store and I want to get something, I get it for me. But before this, if my wife wanted something, I might get it if I thought I liked it. But I didn't care about her, I only cared about me. But Paul said, God told me in the Bible that I needed to love my wife and not to love her even more than I love myself. Well, that has really changed things around our house. And then, where's the children? The children in Philemon's house said, we never cared about doing what our parents said, but when we heard what Paul's letter said, we realized that, well, wait a second, what did Paul's letter say? Does anybody have Colossians 3:20?
Children, obey their parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto God.
Ooh. Paul's letter said, children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto God. So, how can you put Christ first? If you want to please God and put Christ first, how can you put Christ first? What is the verse? Obey who? Obey your parents. Now we might sit here, you might be sitting here saying, oh, I don't really know that much about the Bible. I know we talk about it at Bible Club and at church we talk about it, but I've never seen Jesus. I don't know how to please Jesus. We just learned today how to please Jesus, didn't we? Just now that verse said, what's well-pleasing unto the Lord? Children that obey their parents. So, and you think if you obey your parents, your home will be a happier place to be? Do parents get upset when you don't obey them? Yeah. But if you obey them, so that's a nicer place to live, isn't it? Sure is. And even Mr. Philemon, now he was a businessman. I say he was. I'm Mr. Philemon, right? I am a businessman. I have lots of different people that work for me. And one of those workers is here. So listen to what he says. I work for Mr. Philemon. And I actually go to church at Mr. Philemon's house too, besides working for him. And when I heard what Paul said in his letter, he said to me that when I work for my boss, I need to work for my boss like I'm working for Jesus. Well, that changed things a lot. I used to just go around and just do a little bit, and if I saw my boss coming around, then I would work hard. But then when he went off to check on other people, then I would just be lazy. But when I realized that God sees what I'm doing for my boss all the time, whether my boss is around or not, that changed me. I worked hard all the time, but I enjoyed it because I was working for Christ. That's how I put Christ first. I put Christ first by working hard for my boss. Well, Mr. Philemon here, he said that made a huge difference. But when Paul wrote to me, he said, you guys that are masters, you guys that are bosses, You need to be kind to your workers and treat them like you're equal. I thought, well, that has never happened before. In my day and age, we treat everybody however we want to because they work for us. But I realized that if I'm going to put Christ first, I have to treat the people that work for me kindly and nicely and fairly. So, those are some of the ways that we put Christ first. We stop doing those wicked, evil, fleshly sins that are in our mind that we do because we want to do them. We also treated people nicely. And we thought about that music that we're listening to. And then in our home, I put Christ first by loving my wife. And my children put Christ first by obeying their parents. And at work, I put Christ first by thinking nicely and fairly about my workers. And then, all the time, I pray. I pray. Do you know what praying is? Praying is talking to God, isn't it? It's asking God for things. And then, I do my best to talk to other people and tell them about God. The best thing in all the world for anybody to know is God. If people don't know God, they're in big trouble, aren't they? And so, to put Christ first, I try to tell people about God and what Jesus has done for me. How many of you want to put Christ first in your life? We should want to put Christ first in our life, right? Christ has done everything for us. Jesus Christ, He came and He died on the cross. He was buried and He rose again. And everyone who turns to Him and believes on Him can have their sins forgiven. And if you've had your sins forgiven by Christ, you have eternal life, you can fellowship with God, and you ought to be putting Christ first in your life. You shouldn't be thinking about yourself first, right? You should be being kind to those around you. You're all children, so you should be obeying your parents. If you obeyed your parents when you normally disobey them, would that shock them? They might say, "What happened to you?" And you might say, "Well, I'm trying to put Jesus Christ first, so I'm obeying my parents. I'm obeying you." Right? And then praying and letting people know about Jesus Christ. That is how we can put Christ first. Some people think they put Christ first because they have a cross on a necklace or something like that. But that doesn't put Christ first. Paul told us what puts Christ first, and it's all these things we talked about in our lesson today. And you ought to try to think about things that you could do, things that you need to change in your life that will make it